The Property Pod. Welcome to the Property Pod with Moneyweb. The property sector is an ever-changing sector, and in this podcast series, your host Suren Naidu chats to movers and shakers in the property industry.
Hi there, and welcome to the Property Pod, South Africa's leading property investor podcast, right here on Moneyweb. On this week's show, we have Marius Müller, the chair and co-founder of Soho Properties, talking to us about what he's been up to in the real estate sector over the last few years. Now, real estate industry professionals will know Marius from his one-time role as Pareto CEO. And Pareto, we know, owns some major centers like Sandton City and Menlyn Park, as well as a pavilion in Durban and Tiger Valley in Cape Town. After that, he was CEO of JSE-listed Texton Property Fund for a couple of years and has also had various roles on boards of NPOs and industry organizations. He is also a one-time president of the SA Council of Shopping Centers, as well as the South African Property Owners Association, or SAPOA. Now, he has launched Soho Properties a few years ago, but this is his own venture. Marius, I haven't had you on the podcast, but welcome to the Property Pod at Moneyweb.
Thanks, Ren. It's really great to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
So, Soho Properties, how long has it been going, and where does it play in the SA property market?
So SOHO is an acronym for social housing. And during the time of COVID, we saw many people suffering and going through significant challenges. And I got together with a good friend of mine, Stephen Zaghi. He's a co-founder as well. And we started Soho Properties. And the intention there was really to operate as a not-for-profit organization and to see where we can make a difference and do good, particularly in the space of social housing and residential sector in particular as well. So the focus of Soho is being more in the NGO environment rather than on the commercial front. But we have had to venture into commercial activity as well so that we could continue the business. Funding has been a challenge, and so we've self-funded this over the last few years, since 2020.
Now, I'm told you are now chairperson. At one stage, I think you might have been MD. Now, you've mentioned Steve. Thanks for that. But how do you play in this market? How much of time does it really take up for you? Because I understand that you have another day job in the education space.
I do. So between 2026 now, so 2024, I decided to change paths somewhat and to further my knowledge and education. I then joined the team at WITS and registered for a doctorate on a full-time basis. And what I decided to do was to go into an area that I'm not familiar with, so that I can learn some new things and hopefully, feed that back into the industry within time. So the focus at WITS is really to look at sustainability and how that impacts property from a cost of capital point of view. So the fact that we're investing in sustainable projects and products at a portfolio level and in terms of capital allocation, what does that do as far as cost of capital is concerned, both debt and equity? And as we're able to bring that down, more money flows into sustainable projects. And that's really what I'm busy with at the moment. But also during that time, the development of AI became more prominent and more public facing, although it's been around for decades. And so over the last 2 and a bit years as well, I've developed my skills in AI as well. So it's been a combination of academia and with the purpose of getting a PhD and focusing on sustainability in real estate, but very much enhancing that with AI as well. So it's been somewhat neglected and hence me stepping down as CEO and Steve stepping up into that position. And my role is more of a non-executive, so to speak, because my focus is at WITS at the moment.
I'm sure there's some aspects that align both from an education perspective and the soul side of things, especially you say that it's a non-profit. What sort of impact are you having from that perspective? Because you talk about soul and what was behind the name, social housing. Now, there's a lot of discussion and debate around, the lack of housing in South Africa, some of the challenges. We're seeing a trend of multifamily and that boom, and government hopefully seeming to get its act together and push housing from other sides, to get support from the likes of the big insurers and pension funds and that sort of thing. I know Sanlam is pushing that from one of their recently launched funds. Can you share some insight from that perspective, that impact you'd like to have? And as I mentioned, it's probably interlinked because it also ties into ESG, not just environmental sustainability.
I think there's a couple of challenges in the space, right? There's the supply side, but where we play is particularly difficult because it's not commercially driven. And so the focus is not about returns and distribution. It's about having a social impact. Well, the reality of the matter is that unless you're able to show a return, you have very little interest from the world in general. Now, I'll give you a good example. One of the projects we worked on with social housing, you have to get approval at a municipal level, a provincial level, as well as national level. And then in addition to that is the Social Housing Regulatory Authority, who's mandated to look after social housing in South Africa. So we have all of these approvals in place. We have a signed agreement in place to deliver over 200 units. And the challenge that we then had was finding funding. And we were unable, after 2 years of working on that particular project, to be able to fund it from the private sector. And so unless you're able to get donor funding, money from outside of it, very difficult. Government certainly had stepped up and done its part. It had contributed the major portion of the funding required. So it's a very difficult space to play in, but I think there's still space for the not-for-profit organizations, but the significant burden will be with the private sector. And the fact that it's linked to sustainability and impact investment ties back to the work that I'm doing through my studies at the moment. Because what you need to do is convince those who are making the decisions sitting around the boardroom table, right, that what they're doing is good. And what does that mean? Good means it's giving us the returns that we require, however that is defined. So there are important linkages between, what I'm doing in Soho and what I'm doing through the studies. An essential component to that and the glue in the whole ecosystem there is government. And they're certainly bringing their part. But, first to admit it is not easy dealing with government because they do have their processes in place and one needs to follow that. And it may not be the same timing as a private sector. But the gap for me at the moment is the private sector funding that's required.
Now, there's two elements there because I've covered various aspects of the property sector, and I just thought about this now. Is it still that frustrating to get funding, private sector funding? I'm thinking about that Sanlam Social Impact Fund, and they talked about, unlocking land. So you don't have to have the funding, but if you have land or, we know the issue around title deeds in South Africa, and, Moneyweb reported last year about an initiative in Cape Town, which surprisingly is more successful there, even though there's a lot more opportunity on that housing side in Johannesburg around a company, an investor from the UK, for example, speaking to property owners. They might not have the finance, but they have the land to unlock it. So it sounds like a complicated question here, but it's all interlinked. Do you think there has been some change on that front, or they are pretty much looking at the sexy industry at the moment, and that's multifamily residential with these big companies that are investing in conversions and new developments?
I think the challenges that we face is the legal structure that we have. And so if you look at the likes of Sanlam or, the whole Samba entity, those structures, they have shareholders and they provide dividends, right? And so they're profit driven, and it makes complete sense. It's commercial sense. And it's good to see that sector is growing and is becoming more significant. With With a not-for-profit, you don't have shareholders, but you do have the tax benefit. So you're able to deliver more in terms of the mandate that you have to deliver housing. But the profit share, the profit distribution, that's what's lacking. So you can service the debt. Government has stepped in and they are assisting with reducing the amount of debt that's required and doing away with an equity requirement. But it's the debt component that becomes challenging. And I understand from the bank's point of view that you don't have shareholders, so, who do they have line of sight to? But the beauty of the social housing scheme in South Africa is that you have an underlying asset that's been substantially paid off through the debt, or the debt's been paid off through the grant that comes from government. So it's good to see that there's appetite to do something in the sector, but there are certain niche areas that do need some assistance. And one of the things that we're looking at the moment is to have some sort of crowdfunding platform. Time is a bit of a challenge, and if there are partners out there that we could work with, that would be fantastic. But if you think about the industry, the property industry and the BE scorecards, there's funding that's available there, whether it's through CSI, or it could be small and medium enterprise development, enterprise and supplier development. Here's an opportunity to give back to the industry going through a vehicle like this. So we've certainly put the governance structures in place, and we're hoping to find partners out there, but we haven't actively done that as yet. But the structures are there, and it would be great to have someone that we could kickstart that off. It really is a good model and a good way to showcase a company's contributions to the industry and to the needs of the country.
Well, there's a lot happening on that front, and I think a big part is unlocking the value from, title deeds and that sort of thing. Marius, I know you mentioned BE. We'll get to that in a sec, but talking the social housing side, I know you've had some involvement with the Reside Summit, and that's coming up in May. Are you involved this year? And is that like a platform for you to share some of your thoughts around unlocking funding and finding a way to make a contribution to social housing from an NGO and NPO side?
So the Reside is something I'm really excited about. So the way the Reside started was when I transitioned into the residential sector, having been in retail pretty much all of my career, right? And what I noticed was there wasn't a lot of cohesion in terms of organization within the sector. So having been president at Council of Shopping Centres, I saw what happened in that sector. Having been on the board at SAPOA, saw what's happened in that sector. SAPOA has been around since the 60s. So, and if you think about the work that SAPOA has done, Green Building Council, MSCI, and all of these entities, SACSC has come out of it. But their focus is commercial. And I think came up with this idea that we need to form a SAPOA for the residential sector. And how better way to start that is to have some sort of networking and conference. And that's really where we started. Reside will, I think it's the 20th and the 21st of May at the Sandton Convention Center. Will have its fourth conference, and it's really grown. It's a 2-day summit. What's interesting, if you look at the number of associations and bodies that's involved with the industry, managed to do a database that reflects over 100 organizations. And we've got 40 of those who've now become affiliates, right? So that platform is grown significantly. And there's a lot of education that takes place there. The networking is great. There's some lobbying work that's being undertaken as well. So I'm hoping that Reside as a platform will help organizations like SAMRA, like NASHO, for them to have a voice in a bigger forum, but also to make the residential sector more investor friendly. And the more we talk about it, I think the more it will be noticed, not just as a needy sector of the economy, but an investment opportunity as well.
I'm glad you mentioned SAMRA there, because I understand where you're coming from, but isn't like SAMRA represents the multifamily sector, and that's like an investment class subsector, as it were. But isn't it another organization to deal with, because you have so many organizations? Isn't it a little bit of repetition from a SAMRA and the Reside side? And the reason I ask this, interestingly enough, Estienne de Klerk pretty well, because he's also a former SAPOA CEO and is the current SA RIP chair. And not at this year's summit, but 2 years ago, I think he towards the end of the summit, I didn't write a story on that, but he expressed concerns about too many organizations being out there representing various subsectors of the property sector.
It's a very good question, and it's a good opportunity to explain what happens within Reside as well. So Reside is not only looking at multi-sector, but it's looking at social housing, it's looking at student accommodation, it's looking at retirement, and even within multifamily, there's different components to that. So essentially what Reside does, it takes those different bodies and it creates a platform where those bodies can sit and have a conversation. So it brings together the private sector, educational opportunities, and institutions as well as government. So those 100 organizations that we spoke about, they are also, many of them are very small. They don't really have capacity. They don't have resource. But you have an opportunity for 100 voices with 100 members behind that to sit around one table and have one voice. And so I think if you look at organizations like SAPOA and the Council of Shopping Centres, they do have a specific mandate in terms of focusing on commercial or focusing on retail, but we don't have anything like that for residential. And we know that residential as investment class is multiples of the commercial industry, yet there is no organization representing that. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to find a house in SAPOA or the Council of Shopping Centres. And so it needs to create its own identity. Organizations like SEMRA are the entities that sit around the Reside table. So there's no individual sitting there. It's the organizations. SEMRA on its own will look after multifamily. NASHO looks after social housing. And you've got PHSA looking after student accommodation. But essentially, if you think about it, it's really, it's bums in beds. That's really what it's about, right? And it's maybe a different type of client that's spending the night in the bed. It may be a student, retired person, someone who's on the bottom end of the economic scale, or someone at the top end. But where do they sit down? Because and speak with one voice, because the zoning, the needs, and the infrastructure, it's essentially the same platform. So I think it's a good point that's being made, but I think it reinforces why this actually needs to happen, because there isn't a platform at the moment.
I'll have to chat to Estienne about that, because Growthpoint is also invested in student accommodation. But Marius, before you go, a provocative question to end, if you thought the last one was a little bit provocative. Going back to SOHO properties, I know it's not taking up most of your time. You are a lecturer as well at WITS. On your website, it's a level 1B contributor. It's easier for such organizations to get it if you are small. But I know historically you've been pretty vocal about BE and transformation in the sector. You might have got a few CEOs upset a few years ago or over a decade ago when you spoke at the Sabao convention and basically called out certain issues on transformation. That's becoming a topical issue, not just in the sector, but in South Africa. There's a lot of, the local government elections is coming up. We're having pressure from the US with Elon Musk and Donald Trump questioning the telecommunication side of South Africa's empowerment laws. Has your mind changed, or are you still a big advocate of BE? And what's your position on where the industry, and that's the real estate industry, stand?
I think if you look at the focus of what I've been involved with and doing over the last while, I suppose it's more a mandate and an interest in ensuring that everyone has equal opportunity. And for me, that's really the nucleus of the conversation, is how do we give everyone an opportunity? The challenge for me with BE is being the implementation. And so if you look at something like social housing, you're getting to the broader base and everyone's able to participate. And so as with many things, the challenge is always in the implementation. I think everyone wants to see the same thing happening, the same result, the same outcome. Everyone's employed, everyone has a job, everyone's doing well, there's food on the table, a roof over the head. But I think where BE has felt is that the implementation has not been broad-based enough to bring satisfaction to everyone's table. And I really do think that properly implemented, it can be a win-win for everyone. And maybe if it had been implemented the way it was intended, it would have been off the legislative books by now. But we don't know. I think the important bit is to look forward, right? And say, how can we make this better? Looking back, one can nitpick on that, and you can try and revive comments that were made in the past. But the issue for me is really, how do we hold hands and move forward to make things better, and rather spend our time and efforts on that, reflecting on that.
So it might be a little bit of a change of heart there, or you just may have chose to be a little bit more diplomatic. But Marius, thank you so much for your time on the Property Pod. That was Marius Müller, the chair of Soho Properties, and he's also the co-founder of the company and a lecturer at Wits University.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Property Pod with Suren Naidu. To listen to more episodes, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates. Follow Suren on Twitter @Suren Naidu for more of his property industry content and other business stories. The Property Pod.